We have some breaking news in college basketball where the punishment is in for the Memphis men's basketball program for their recruitment of James Wiseman. The NCAA has put the program on 3 years probation with a $5,000 fine. The Tigers will also have to vacate any wins involving Wiseman. Now, also notable, there was no suspension for Coach Penny Hardaway. The Tigers also retained their eligibility for the 2023 NCAA tournament. And we do want to welcome in our college basketball experts, Garry, Parrish and Matt Norlander, to break this all down. So, guys, at first, the penalties seems pretty light upon first glance. So what are your initial reactions to this verdict?
Well, the punishment is obviously light. I mean, Memphis was potentially facing all sorts of things, among them a postseason ban for the 2023 NCAA tournament and also a suspension, possibly a lengthy one, for head coach Penny Hardaway. All of that, we now know, will not happen. And so if you're a Memphis fan, a Memphis administrator, a Memphis student athlete, you're really thrilled with this outcome. They spent literally years fighting on behalf of Penny Hardaway and the program after it nonsensically played James Wiseman in defiance of the NCAA. And now we know that Memphis's fight led to a preferable outcome. It's a fine that really has no tangible impact, probation that shouldn't harm the program in any sort of meaningful way, and the vacated wins obviously don't matter to anybody, including Penny Hardaway. This is a tremendous outcome for that Memphis basketball program.
Yeah, the big takeaway here is that there's no postseason ban and no punishment for Penny Hardaway. But how about this, GP? Memphis was initially facing 4 level 1 violations, or at least allegations of. And now where we stand here today, frankly, and we'll talk about this on the Eye on College Basketball podcast later today as well, this is not a common thing. Now, this is the IARP. Let's also be clear about one thing here. The IARP, which is different from the NCAA Committee on Infractions, ruled on this case. I want to say, never see a program face 4 level 1, which is the most severe kind of violations, and then come out on the other side of that looking better than anticipated. That's exactly what happened with Memphis here. I do want to also note that the James Wiseman case in relation to the IARP is different from the schools that still await their FBI case fates, namely Louisville, Kansas, Arizona, and LSU. So I don't know if this case in particular will be a good omen or harbinger of things to come with those 4 schools. But for Memphis, this is absolutely the best case scenario. I got to admit, I'm a little surprised here, and I'm also surprised that it took this long to come to this kind of resolution. Usually if a case drags and drags and drags, as we've seen in the past with the likes of Syracuse and others, you usually have something a bit heavier that lands on a school's lap. That's not the case here. Memphis will go into the 22-23 season with optimism sky high and basically having gotten off pretty lightly here at the hands of the IARP.
And Garry, something else that's important to note, this isn't the first time that Memphis's program has faced NCAA penalties.
It certainly isn't. You know, Memphis has participated in 3 Final Fours in school history. 2 of them are vacated. The 1985 Final Four, when Dana Kirk was the head coach, and of course the 2008 Final Four, when John Calipari was the head coach. So Memphis has a long, not so great history with the NCAA, but among other things, the administration and its attorneys argued in this case that sure, Penny Hardaway did provide money to James Wiseman's family in a description of moving expenses to allow him to move from Nashville to Memphis to play at East High School when Penny Hardaway was the head coach at East High School well before he was the head coach at the University of Memphis. The attorneys argued that Penny Hardaway has been giving money to impoverished or families that could use it, both basketball players and non-basketball players, for years, well before he did it with James Wiseman, and even well before he officially became a Memphis donor / booster back in 2008. And the IARP, it took that and accepted that, and basically ruled that because Penny Hardaway has forever been philanthropic in his community, that they're not going to hold him accountable for being philanthropic when it comes to James Wiseman. Again, it's not an argument that I'm certain I would have told you I believed would have worked a year ago or 2 years ago, but it seemed to produce a favorable outcome here.
And Matt, I know you touched on it just a bit ago, but the independent accountability resolution process, can you just kind of explain to us in layman terms how that process worked? And also, we're still not sure what this means for other programs down the road, like you said, Kansas and Arizona.
Yeah, Kansas, Arizona, Louisville, LSU are the 4 schools there. So real quick, remember the IARP was born out of the Rice Commission, which was only created because there was the FBI scandal that went public. Oh, by the way, Monday was the 5-year anniversary, so we are 5 years and 1 day removed from that thing going public. The IRP was formed in 2019, a 15-person panel, technically supposed to be independent from the NCAA, and yet, having said that, there are people with NCAA backgrounds that are on this board. But this result will certainly generate a lot of conversation and chatter because of the nature of how light the result was. And I'll also remind our viewers that the IARP recently was voted on to dissolve in the coming months. Basically, it was looked at because of how slow these cases were taking, how much of a waste of time and resources and money it was for the NCAA to pay out this process. They're going to get rid of the IARP once those 4 other schools get their rulings. I can't say definitively that because Memphis got off light here and Penny Hardaway is facing no suspension and there's no postseason ban, I can't tell you that means that Kansas won't face a postseason ban or LSU won't face a postseason ban or Sean Miller, formerly at Arizona, now the head coach at Xavier, won't face a kind of suspension. I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but because the IARP took this long and ultimately believed Memphis' story, it certainly signals a good thing. I also want to note real quick one thing. The IARP seemed to take a big scan of the entire situation, and it noted in its ruling that Penny Hardaway, who had helped, and GP can speak to this as well as anyone, he's played at Memphis, he lives in Memphis, from Memphis, he had helped youth basketball and been very philanthropic in that space, in that area for years and years and years. He ran a grassroots program before ever becoming the Memphis head coach. It seems like the IARP and that board was actually pretty level-headed and said, listen, we understand what you were doing for the better part of a decade here, and the fact that you, yes, did pay moving expenses for James Wiseman to come play high school basketball in Memphis before you were the coach. It was a rule violation. We take it you did it in good faith. And so I actually do commend the IARP. Even if the result was not the anticipated one, I'd say it was even pragmatic in taking all context into account here and levying its punishments against Memphis.
It's not apples to apples, but it is similar to the argument North Carolina made when it was facing possible NCAA punishment for what was determined to be fraudulent classes. Obviously, there was a lot of student athletes taking advantage of those classes at North Carolina, but the school argued successfully that there were also non-student athletes in these exact same classes, meaning these classes were available to literally anybody on campus, therefore should not be considered an impermissible benefit or fraudulent class strictly for student athletes. And that is how North Carolina, in part at least, beat that case. Memphis argued something very similar here. Yes, Penny Hardaway gave James Wiseman's family a lot of money, but he's given a lot of families a lot of money over the years. This is a man who is from Memphis, from the toughest parts, who became a multimillionaire playing basketball with a pretty lucrative Nike deal, and he has spent literally his life, well before he replaced Tubby Smith at Memphis as its head coach, helping families who need help. It wasn't just about James Wiseman. He's helped many people over the years, and therefore it should not be considered an impermissible benefit or a recruiting inducement. Again, it was a strategy that probably had some holes in it, but it worked. And for that, the attorneys representing Memphis here deserve a lot of credit. I don't think literally anybody was predicting a punishment as light as the punishment as Memphis got this morning. I cannot overstate, as somebody who lives in the market, who graduated from that school, how much a win this is for the entire university and this city that cares so deeply about that basketball program.
Garry, Parrish, and Matt Norlander, our college basketball experts, thank you guys so much for your insight. And Garry and Matt will tackle this topic more on their podcast, Eye on Basketball. Make sure you download and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. They're going to be discussing the Memphis sanctions and what the future holds for these IARP cases.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.